I lived in multiple countries around the world over the past several years for two reasons. One, because it's just a nice lifestyle. I enjoy being able to go where I want to go during certain seasons to miss the extreme heat or to miss the extreme cold or just to be with people that I enjoy being with, etc. But the other reason is because I try to live on multiple grids now based off of what happened during COVID. COVID was sort of a wake-up call for me because I realized how fragile, not just the world was, but how fragile it was to live on one grid with one passport. And I don't like the idea of being pessimistic about the future. I like to be optimistic about the future. I like to be realistic too, but I like to be optimistic. Having said that, I think there are two ways to sort of look at America declining, and I talked about that last week. Check that video out if you want, but also potential World War III. I hope it never happens, but I will say that if America ever got into a war with China, for example, if you're an American, just go to Walmart or Target or really any store, Amazon, and look at where it's made. Now, imagine if you're ever in a war with the country that makes all your stuff and they stop sending you stuff, your Walmart's gonna be empty, your Target's gonna be, like, there's nothing that America produces internally that's going to be able to replenish what it has in the stores currently. I don't think that will ever happen to where it gets to that point. But I also never thought COVID was going to happen, and either way, I just think it's best to prepare for the future by having options. I think some people see bad things in the future happening, or at least an uncertain future, and they think, okay, well, I'm going to prep. I'm going to be a prepper. I'm going to, go live in a basement and put all the food in the basement, prepare myself, and have a generator and all this extra stuff so that I can survive. And I think there are a few problems with that not very many people who are preppers maybe think about. But also I think there's a much better way of handling it nowadays. For one, when you focus just on surviving, you never really focus on living. Like, yes, you didn't die, but did you ever really live? Versus, a byproduct of focusing on thriving in your life is also surviving. I was in Portugal about a month ago when the entire Iberian Peninsula's electricity went out for, I don't know, it was a full day. Thankfully, it didn't last very long, but one thing I noticed is when you're sitting there at night and there is no electricity, but there's one person in the area that has electricity, their house lights up like a Christmas tree. Like, everyone can see that you have electricity. Now, at the time, that's no problem, but it only lasted, it was like 12 hours or something without electricity. It was somewhat rare. Thankfully, no one panicked or anything, and it was fine. But the problem is, what if the electricity was off for multiple days at a time? There would be some point where the people in that house with the lights became a target. And it's just the reality of it. Like, if people are hungry, they're gonna at least go and, knock on the door and say, can you give me food? But at the worst, maybe they're gonna go and try to take your food. So I think the best way to handle an uncertain future isn't necessarily to prep and to stay there and try to survive, but instead just leave. If you were in Germany before World War II, the best thing you probably could have done realistically was to just leave. Before COVID, if you did not want to be in a city that was extremely locked down and you couldn't do anything for a year or two at a time, the best thing you could have done is leave. Now, you might say, well, how do I know something like that's going to happen? Well, we don't, but at least in the moment, we can choose to go somewhere where we already have residence permits, we already have citizenships, we already have reasons to go there. Versus, people in Australia were locked in their country. It makes no sense to me why they were locked in the country. I kind of understand preventing people from coming in because you don't want them to bring in COVID, but to not go out just makes no sense to me, and it's a human right violation. But besides the point, the people who were Australians who did make it out and who at least wanted to make it out were the ones who had connections in other countries. Maybe they were a citizen in another country, or maybe they had some sort of business in another country. The fact of the matter is, it allowed them to sort of hop between those grids in turbulent times. Another example is, during the Russia-Ukraine war, if you had ties to another country, you were more easily able to leave Ukraine or Russia and to just get out of the entire conflict, versus if you only were living in Ukraine or Russia and you only had that citizenship and that's where all your ties were, it was much, much more difficult to leave. And this sort of plays out with any conflict. If you're in a country and you don't agree with the conflict or you don't agree with what's going on, you're in a much better position if you're able to leave and go somewhere else because you happen to also be a dual citizen of another country. So to summarize my point, I think we should be optimistic about the future. I'm not here to fearmonger and say that tomorrow's gonna be World War III or anything like that. But I do think it's better to have options, and I do think it's better to live on multiple grids versus off grid and, basically be that one lit target in the whole city of darkness. Do you guys agree with this? Disagree with this theory? What do you guys think? Let me know in the chat below. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to follow me. I'm on my 9th year of digital nomading while I buy and build businesses that fund my lifestyle.